What would you do if you woke up from surgery and discovered your own child had stolen your house? I'm Walter, and that nightmare became my reality 3 months ago. But this isn't a story about being a victim. This is a story about what happens when you mess with the wrong old man. You're watching Betrayal HQ, where family loyalty dies and justice is served cold. If you're new here, we share the real stories of family betrayal straight from the people who lived them and fought back. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell, because what Walter did next will leave you speechless. My daughter Brenda thought she was smart. Forge Dad's signature while he's unconscious, transfer the house deed, cash out the equity, and live happily ever after. She made one critical mistake. She underestimated her father. The heart monitor beeping beside my hospital bed was the only sound in the room when my phone rang. 3 days after my cardiac procedure, I was feeling stronger, ready to go home to the house my wife Mary and I had built 50 years ago. Walter? The voice belonged to Patricia, who used to work with Mary at the county records office. She sounded nervous. "I need to tell you something important." My chest tightened, but not from my heart condition. "What is it, Patricia?" "Brenda was here today. She filed a quitclaim deed on your house. She had some kind of power of attorney document." The words hit me like ice water. My daughter had been to my house twice since Mary's funeral 6 months ago. Both times, she'd commented on how much the property was worth. "Are you sure?" I asked, though I already knew Patricia wouldn't call unless she was certain. "I'm sorry, Walter. The deed transfer went through this morning. According to the paperwork, the house belongs to Brenda now." I hung up and stared at the ceiling. My daughter had stolen my home while I was recovering from surgery. I didn't waste time feeling sorry for myself. I called Lucille Barnes, the toughest lawyer in town. She'd handled Mary's will and knew my family situation. "Lucille, I need you at the hospital immediately. It's an emergency." Within an hour, she was sitting beside my bed with her briefcase open, reviewing the documents Patricia had quietly copied for me. "This power of attorney document is suspicious," Lucille said, studying it carefully. "The signature doesn't match your usual writing, and the date shows you signed it yesterday, while you were in surgery." "Because I didn't sign it." Lucille's eyes hardened. "Then we're dealing with forgery. But here's what we're going to do instead of going the criminal route immediately." She pulled out her laptop and started typing. "I'm filing eviction papers against your daughter. Since she used fraudulent documents to claim ownership, we're treating this as an illegal occupancy case. Can we do that? We're about to find out. I'm also requesting a temporary restraining order to prevent her from using the house as collateral for any loans." I watched Lucille work, feeling hope for the first time since Patricia's call. Brenda moved fast. By the time I was discharged 2 days later, she'd changed the locks and moved furniture into my house. Arthur, my neighbor, called to tell me, "Walter, I'm sorry to say this, but your daughter has been loading boxes into the house all morning." Her husband, Anthony, was directing some moving guys. I sat in my temporary apartment, the one Lucille had helped me find, and tried to stay calm. But seeing my home through Arthur's description felt like watching strangers ransack Mary's memory. "There's something else," Arthur continued. "She's already talking to contractors about renovating the kitchen. Said she's planning to modernize the old place. That kitchen was where Mary had baked bread every Sunday for 30 years. The thought of Brenda tearing it apart made my hand shake with anger, but then I remembered something that made me smile. When Mary and I had built the house, she'd insisted on including a very specific covenant in the deed, something about maintaining the original boundary walls and landscaping. Brenda had always been careless about details. I wondered if she'd bothered to read the fine print. I called the notary, whose name appeared on the power of attorney document. Her name was Susan Williams, and she sounded nervous when I introduced myself. "Mr. Thompson, I wondered when you might call. Susan, I need to ask you about the document you notarized for my daughter." There was a long pause. "Sir, I have to be honest with you. Your daughter rushed me through that signing. She said you were waiting in the car because you couldn't walk far after your surgery. My heart rate spiked. But you never saw me, Did you? No, sir. She showed me an ID with your name and said you'd signed it outside. I should have insisted on seeing you personally, but she seemed so urgent about getting it filed before some deadline. Susan, would you be willing to give a sworn statement about what really happened? Another pause. Mr. Thompson, I could lose my license over this mistake, but yes, if it helps fix what I did wrong, I'll make a statement. Within hours, Lucille had Susan's affidavit. The document detailed exactly how Brenda had pressured her and lied about my presence during the supposed signing. I finally had proof that my daughter was a thief. The temporary restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following week. Lucille presented Susan's affidavit and pointed out a critical error in Brenda's filing. Your Honor, the defendant failed to provide proper notification to Mr. Thompson before executing the quitclaim deed. According to county regulations, any power of attorney transfer of property requires written notice to all affected parties. The judge reviewed our documents carefully. Brenda sat across the courtroom with a lawyer she'd hired, looking confident and slightly annoyed. Miss Thompson, the judge said, addressing Brenda, can you provide proof that you notified your father of this property transfer? Brenda's lawyer whispered something to her, then stood up. Your Honor, our client believed the power of attorney document gave her authority to act on her father's behalf without additional notification. That's not how property law works, the judge replied. I'm granting the temporary restraining order. Miss Thompson, you may remain in the residence, but you cannot use the property as collateral for any financial transactions until this matter is resolved. Brenda's face turned red. As we left the courthouse, I heard her arguing loudly with her lawyer about how this was supposed to be simple. That night, I remembered the covenant Mary had insisted on including in our original deed. I called Lucille with the details. Mary was very specific about maintaining the original stone boundary wall and the oak trees along the property line. Anyone who owns the house has to follow an expensive maintenance schedule. Lucille was quiet for a moment. Walter, covenants like that can cost thousands of dollars annually. Did Brenda know about this requirement? I doubt she read the original deed that carefully. She was always in a hurry. This could be our ace in the hole. If she can't afford to maintain the covenant requirements, she can't legally hold the property. The next morning, Lucille confirmed that the covenant was still valid and binding. Any new property owner had 90 days to prove they could meet the financial obligations, or the transfer would be voided. I started calculating the costs in my head. The stone wall repairs alone would cost at least $15,000. The required tree maintenance and landscaping would add another $10,000 annually. Brenda had stolen my house, but she'd inherited a very expensive problem she never saw coming. Arthur became my secret weapon. I asked him to document everything Brenda and Anthony did to the property. Arthur, I need you to take pictures if they damage anything, especially near the boundary wall. Already started, Walter. Yesterday, Anthony backed a moving truck right into the corner of the stone wall, knocked off about 6 stones. Perfect. Covenant violations came with automatic penalties, and property damage during the violation period could void any ownership claims. Keep taking pictures, I told him. And if you see any contractors working without permits, document that too. Arthur had been my neighbor for 20 years. He'd watched Mary tend her garden and knew how much this house meant to us. His anger at Brenda's theft was almost as strong as mine. Walter, there's something else. I overheard Anthony on the phone talking about some kind of loan. He kept saying, the house is ours now, and mentioning numbers in the hundreds of thousands. So they were already planning to borrow money against my stolen property. That information would be very useful when we got to court. I thanked Arthur and hung up, feeling the pieces of my plan falling into place. Anthony called me directly 3 days later. His voice was aggressive and threatening. Walter, you need to stop this legal nonsense. Brenda legally owns that house now, and your eviction filing just proves you're not thinking clearly. I kept my voice calm and steady. Anthony, I'm thinking very clearly. Clear enough to wonder why you're so concerned about a house that supposedly belongs to your wife. We're considering filing a guardianship petition. Maybe you need someone else making decisions for you." I smiled, knowing he couldn't see me. "That's interesting. Are you recording this conversation, Anthony?" "What? No. Why would I?" "Because I am. And threatening to file frivolous guardianship petitions to coerce elderly people is considered elder abuse under state law." The line went quiet. "Furthermore," I continued, "I had a complete mental competency evaluation done before my surgery. Clean bill of health. So your guardianship petition would be dismissed and you'd face sanctions." I heard Anthony breathing heavily. "This isn't over, old man. You're right. It's just getting started." When he hung up, I immediately called Lucille with the recording. She laughed when she heard Anthony's threats. "Walter, this man just handed us more ammunition. I'm filing a motion to sanction him for coercive behavior." My suspicions about their loan plans were confirmed when I called Anthony back the next day with a simple question. "Anthony, I'm curious about something. When you and Brenda bought your current house, what kind of loan did you use? Why do you care?" Just wondering how young people handle these big financial decisions nowadays. Anthony's ego couldn't resist. "We used a bridge loan against Brenda's inheritance. Smart financial planning." There it was. They'd borrowed money based on the promise of getting my house, which meant their entire financial structure depended on the fraud being successful. "That sounds complicated," I said innocently. "What happens if the inheritance doesn't work out as planned?" "It's going to work out fine. The house is legally Brenda's now." After I hung up, I called Lucille with this new information. "They've built their finances on quicksand," she said. "If we can prove the deed was fraudulent, their bridge loan becomes immediately due and payable. They'll lose everything." I felt a cold satisfaction. Brenda hadn't just stolen my house. She'd set a trap that would destroy her own financial future when it snapped shut. Lucille moved quickly to file a preventative motion against Anthony's threatened guardianship petition. "Your Honor," she argued at the hearing, "Mr. Anthony Thompson has no legal standing to petition for guardianship of his father-in-law. Furthermore, his recorded threats to us new file such a petition as retaliation for legitimate legal action constitute elder abuse." The judge listened to our recording of Anthony's phone call. His expression grew stern. "Mr. Anthony Thompson, are you present in court today?" Anthony stood up reluctantly. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm issuing a formal warning. Any frivolous guardianship petition filed against Mr. Walter Thompson will result in sanctions against you personally, including possible criminal referral for elder abuse." Anthony's face went pale. His lawyer looked embarrassed. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I'm noting in the case file that Mr. Walter Thompson appears to be mentally competent and is represented by capable counsel. This should end any speculation about his decision-making capacity." As we left court, I saw Anthony arguing angrily with Brenda in the hallway. Their plan to have me declared incompetent had backfired spectacularly. Lucille was smiling. "Walter, we just made it nearly impossible for them to challenge your mental state. That was their strongest potential argument." Brenda tried a different approach. She posted on social media about my abandonment of the family home. "Sad to see Dad moving out of the house Mom loved so much. At least someone in the family cares enough to maintain their memory." The post made my blood boil, but Lucille saw it as an opportunity. "Walter, she just publicly admitted to taking possession of your house. She's also implying she has rightful ownership, which contradicts her claim that you willingly transferred it." Lucille screenshot the post and several others, where Brenda talked about inheriting the house and her plans to renovate Dad's old place. "Social media posts are admissible evidence," Lucille explained. "She's building our case for us by documenting her deception." I learned that Brenda had also been telling neighbors that I was happy to sell the house and move to a retirement community. She was spreading lies to cover up the theft. But the neighbors who really mattered, people like Arthur, who'd known Mary and me for decades, weren't buying Brenda's story. They remembered how much the house meant to us and how carefully we'd maintained it. The community support felt good, but I knew the real battle would be fought in court, not in the neighborhood. 2 weeks later, I discovered that Brenda had stopped paying the utility bills. Arthur called to tell me the electric company had posted a shut-off notice on the front door. She probably thinks the bills automatically transfer with the deed, Arthur said. I immediately drove to the house and paid all the outstanding utility bills: electric, gas, water, and trash service. I kept every receipt. This proves continued ownership and responsibility, Lucille explained, when I showed her the receipts. If she really owned the house, she'd be paying these bills. The fact that you're maintaining financial responsibility undermines her ownership, claims. I also noticed that Brenda hadn't arranged for property insurance transfer. The house was still covered under my policy, which meant I was still legally responsible for it. Walter, this is perfect, Lucille said. She's acting like a squatter, not an owner. Owners pay bills and carry insurance. She's doing neither. Every bill I paid strengthened our case that I remained the true owner of the property, despite Brenda's fraudulent paperwork. Lucille filed a mandatory disclosure request, forcing Brenda to reveal her financial ability to maintain the property according to the covenant requirements. The hearing was uncomfortable. Brenda's lawyer had to admit they'd never budgeted for the covenant costs because they'd never read the original deed carefully. Your Honor, my client was unaware of these additional financial obligations, her lawyer said. The judge looked unimpressed. Ignorance of deed requirements is not a legal excuse. Miss Thompson, can you demonstrate financial ability to meet the covenant obligations? Brenda squirmed in her chair. We're working on securing financing. Based on what collateral? Her lawyer whispered urgently to her. The property itself, Your Honor. The property that's currently under a restraining order, preventing its use as collateral. I watched Brenda realize she was trapped. She couldn't afford the covenant requirements without borrowing against the house. But she couldn't borrow against the house because of our legal challenge. Your Honor, we request additional time to arrange financing. Denied. The covenant requirements are immediate and ongoing. If you cannot meet them, you cannot maintain legal ownership. As we left court, I knew we'd just delivered a devastating blow to Brenda's case. The court-mandated mediation session was held in a small conference room. Brenda arrived with Anthony and their lawyer. I came with Lucille. Walter, please, Brenda said, tears in her eyes. I have children to think about. They need stability. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become someone who would steal from her own father? Brenda, your mother and I built that house with our own hands. We planted every tree, laid every stone in that wall. You stole it. I didn't steal anything. You're getting old, Dad. You can't maintain that big house anymore. That wasn't your decision to make. She broke down sobbing. I need this house, Dad. Anthony's business is struggling, and we owe so much money. The kids' school costs, the mortgage on our current house. We're drowning. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the forged signature and the lies to the notary. My wife and I built that house, I repeated quietly. And you stole it while I was in the hospital recovering from surgery. I stood up. We're going to court. The mediator looked disappointed, but Lucille seemed satisfied. Brenda's desperation was now officially on record. Lucille managed to subpoena the loan officer who'd approved Brenda and Anthony's bridge loan. The hearing was crucial to our case. Mr. Rodriguez, Lucille asked the nervous-looking banker, what collateral did the defendants provide for their loan? They provided documentation showing ownership of a property valued at approximately $400,000. Was this documentation the quitclaim deed filed by Miss Thompson? Yes, along with the power of attorney document. Did you verify the authenticity of these documents? Mr. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. We performed standard verification procedures. Did you contact Mr. Walter Thompson to confirm he had authorized this transfer? No. The power of attorney document indicated Miss Thompson had authority to act on his behalf. Lucille presented our evidence of the forged signature and Susan's affidavit about the notarization. Mr. Rodriguez, if these documents are fraudulent, what happens to the bridge loan? The loan would become immediately due and payable in full. I watched Brenda's face go white. Anthony grabbed her arm and whispered something urgent. How much is the outstanding balance? Lucille asked. Approximately $270,000. The courtroom was silent. Brenda and Anthony clearly didn't have that kind of money available. Brenda's desperation led to a desperate move. She filed a counterclaim alleging that I had promised her the house years earlier. My father told me multiple times that the house would be mine after he passed away, she claimed in her sworn statement. I wasn't surprised by this lie, because I'd prepared for it years ago. When Mary was dying, I'd written a series of letters to her about my plans for our home. She'd insisted I have them notarized, saying it would prevent family disputes later. Lucille presented these letters in court. They clearly stated my intention to leave the house to the Nature Conservancy as a wildlife preserve, honoring Mary's love of the birds and animals that visited our property. As you can see, Your Honor, Mr. Thompson's documented intentions directly contradict his daughter's claims of a promise. The judge read through the letters carefully. These are dated and notarized. They appear to be genuine expressions of Mr. Thompson's wishes. Brenda's lawyer objected. These letters could have been written recently to support my client's father's current position. Counselor, these letters reference the defendant's mother's illness and are dated 2 years ago. Unless you're alleging a conspiracy involving multiple notaries and medical records, your objection is overruled. Brenda looked stunned. She'd never known about the letters or my plans for the property. Someone leaked our story to a local news blogger who specialized in property disputes. The headline read, "Daughter accused of stealing father's home during hospital stay." I was embarrassed by the story, publicity, but Lucille helped me see the advantages. Walter, public sympathy is with you. The story is framed as an elderly widower fighting family abuse, not as a family squabble. The comments on the blog post were overwhelmingly supportive. People shared their own stories of family members who tried to take advantage of elderly relatives. One comment particularly struck me. "This is why I keep all my legal documents with my attorney instead of family. You can't trust blood anymore." The publicity also brought forward other people who'd had dealings with Anthony's business. Several reached out to share stories about unpaid bills and questionable practices. Your daughter and her husband have a pattern of financial irresponsibility, Lucille noted. This supports our argument that they're unfit to own valuable property. I felt vindicated but sad. The whole situation had spiraled far beyond a simple property dispute. The judge ordered an independent property appraisal, which seemed routine until the appraiser discovered something unexpected. "There's an undisclosed easement along the eastern boundary," he reported. "It appears someone failed to mention a utility right-of-way when filing the quitclaim deed." This was news to both sides. The easement reduced the property value and created additional legal complications. "Your Honor," Lucille argued, "this undisclosed easement proves that the defendants did not perform due diligence before claiming ownership. They filed fraudulent documents and failed to research the property they were stealing." Brenda's lawyer tried to argue that I should have disclosed the easement too, but I'd never filed any ownership transfer documents. "Mr. Thompson has maintained continuous ownership," Lucille countered. "He had no obligation to disclose anything because he never tried to transfer the property." The easement discovery strengthened our position by highlighting Brenda's careless approach to the whole scheme. But more importantly, it showed that she'd borrowed money against a property she didn't fully understand or properly evaluate. Anthony's panic finally got the better of him. He called me late one night, his voice shaking. "Walter, we need to work something out. This has gone too far." "What do you have in mind, Anthony?" "Look, maybe we made some mistakes with the paperwork, but we can fix this. We just need time to get our finances straight." I kept my voice neutral. "What kind of mistakes?" "Okay, fine. I might have helped with your signature on the power of attorney, but we were just trying to help you transition to a smaller place." There it was, a full confession to forgery. "Anthony, are you saying you forged my signature?" "I'm saying we could all benefit from working together instead of fighting in court." "But you did forge my signature?" "Yes, but..." I hung up and immediately called Lucille with the recording. "Walter, he just handed us everything we need for criminal charges. Forging signatures on legal documents is a felony." The confession changed everything. We now had proof of criminal activity, not just a civil dispute. The eviction hearing was our moment of truth. Lucille presented our evidence methodically. Susan's affidavit about the notarization fraud, Anthony's recorded confession to forgery, the utility receipts proving my continued ownership, and photographs of the covenant violations. Your Honor, the defendants obtained possession of this property through criminal fraud. The power of attorney document contains a forged signature, as confessed by Mr. Anthony Thompson in a recorded phone call. The judge listened to Anthony's confession. Brenda sat rigid in her chair, staring straight ahead. Furthermore, Lucille continued, the defendants have failed to meet the covenant requirements, defaulted on utility obligations, and damaged the property during their illegal occupancy. Brenda's lawyer made a weak argument about good faith mistakes, but the evidence was overwhelming. I find that the quitclaim deed was executed using fraudulent documents, the judge ruled. The deed transfer is void, and the property reverts to Mr. Walter Thompson. The defendants have 30 days to vacate. Brenda finally broke down completely, sobbing as the judge's words sank in. I felt no joy in her pain, but I felt immense relief that justice had been served. Lucille immediately filed a comprehensive civil lawsuit against both Brenda and Anthony. We sought damages for fraud, elder abuse, property damage, legal fees, and emotional distress. Walter, this isn't just about getting your house back anymore. They committed crimes against you, and they need to face consequences. The civil case allowed us to demand financial records showing exactly how much they'd borrowed against my stolen property and what they'd spent the money on. The discovery process revealed shocking financial irresponsibility. They'd used the bridge loan money for luxury purchases, gambling debts, and failed business investments. They stole your house to fund their lifestyle, Lucille said, reviewing their bank statements. This wasn't about need, it was about greed. The civil lawsuit also allowed us to seek punitive damages, which could potentially bankrupt them completely. I wrestled with whether that was too harsh, but then I remembered lying in my hospital bed, vulnerable and trusting, while my daughter forged my signature to steal my home. Some actions deserve severe consequences. The bridge loan company moved faster than our civil case. Once news of the fraud became public, they demanded immediate repayment of the entire loan balance. Arthur called to tell me that several official-looking cars had visited the house where Brenda was still packing. Looked like bank representatives and maybe some kind of investigators, he reported. Lucille confirmed that the loan company had filed their own lawsuit and frozen Brenda and Anthony's assets. They borrowed nearly $300,000 against your house. Now that the house is yours again, they have no collateral and no way to repay. Within a week, Brenda and Anthony were forced to file for bankruptcy. Their current home went into foreclosure, their cars were repossessed, and their bank accounts were seized. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness watching their financial collapse. They'd brought it on themselves, but it was still painful to see family destroyed, even family that had betrayed me. Walter, Lucille said, they made their choices. You're not responsible for the consequences they're facing. The civil court ruling was swift and comprehensive. The judge awarded us every penny we'd requested. $300,000 in compensatory damages, $100,000 in punitive damages, and full reimbursement of all legal costs. The defendants engaged in a calculated scheme to defraud an elderly family member, the judge stated. Their actions represent a particularly egregious form of elder abuse that demands severe consequences. Brenda and Anthony were officially ruined. The bankruptcy court would sell off everything they owned, but it wouldn't come close to covering their debts. They would spend years paying off what they owed, assuming they could find steady employment with criminal fraud convictions on their records. I sat in the courtroom feeling empty rather than victorious. Justice had been served, but the cost was the complete destruction of my relationship with my only child. As we gathered our papers to leave, Brenda looked at me with pure hatred. Whatever love had once existed between us was gone forever. I'd won everything and lost my daughter. The victory felt hollow. Returning home for the first time since my surgery felt surreal. The house looked exactly as Mary and I had left it, except for the damage Brenda had caused during her brief occupation. The stone wall corner that Anthony had damaged with the moving truck would cost several thousand to repair properly. Some of Mary's carefully tended flower beds had been trampled during the move, but the house itself was intact. Our bedroom, the kitchen where Mary had baked countless loaves of bread, the living room where we'd spent quiet evenings together, all exactly as we'd left them. I spent the afternoon walking through each room, remembering 50 years of life with Mary. The house felt both familiar and empty without her presence. As evening came, I sat on the back porch where Mary used to watch her birds. The oak trees we'd planted as saplings now towered over the yard, providing shade and shelter for the wildlife she'd loved. I realized that saving the house wasn't just about property or principle. It was about preserving the physical space where our love had grown and flourished. This house would remain a monument to what Mary and I had built together. 6 months later, I used the settlement money to establish the Safe Deed Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting elderly people from family property fraud. Arthur became my first volunteer, helping to staff a hotline for seniors who suspected family members of financial abuse. "Walter, you've turned something terrible into something that helps people," he said during one of our planning meetings. We partnered with local attorneys to provide free consultations and helped lobby for stronger laws requiring multiple witnesses for power of attorney documents. The organization grew quickly. Apparently, my experience wasn't as unusual as I'd hoped. Elder financial abuse was a widespread problem that needed attention. I found purpose in helping others avoid what I'd been through. Every person we helped felt like a small victory over the cynicism that Brenda's betrayal had created. On quiet evenings, I still sat on the back porch, watching Mary's birds, and feeling her presence in the home we'd shared. The house was secure, the legacy was protected, and I'd found a way to make meaning from the pain. Brenda never contacted me again. Sometimes, I wondered if she understood the true cost of what she'd done, but mostly, I focused on the future rather than dwelling on the past. I'd learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about trust, respect, and caring for each other's well-being. The people who helped me through this crisis showed me what real family looks like. The house stood strong, just as Mary and I had built it to do. Walter got justice through the courts, but sometimes revenge is more immediate. Coming tomorrow, the story of a wealthy father who discovered exactly how his daughter really felt about him when she introduced him as her gardener to her fancy friends. What happened next will restore your faith that karma exists. Hit subscribe and that bell icon, because at Betrayal HQ, we bring you the family. Betrayals that end with perfect justice. Don't miss it.